Yeah,
we would say 9 to Friday night sometimes.
Do you remember?
Yeah. Friday night. Shabbos, the whole day was Farbrengen. And Motzei Shabbos they would wash. I do it Farbrengen. So it was like, you go by the Rebbe for 24 hours. And the Rebbe down for Amid also. It was on Shabbos, we down for Amid. I just wanted to mention, I didn't mention this afternoon, but I was fortunate to have a Yechidus with the Rebbe many times for our birthdays. One of my birthdays was the Kaviyas this year that Shabbos was Yud Shvat. My birthday was on Friday, every Yud Shvat. So the Rebbe and Yechidus told me that being that Friday is your birthday, so I'm sure you could do Mavit Sedra on Friday instead of waiting till Shabbos Friday night or Shabbos morning like some people do. He said you should do the paltiel, you should at least start on Friday. So of course I listen to the Rebbe every year when it comes to this Kaviyas. On Friday I do Mavit Sedra. The rest of the year I don't know, but if it comes to the Friday after Shabbos, then I do it. But maybe we can learn from this that it's important. Mavit Sedra means you say the Chumash twice and you say the Targum one time. The Targum is actually, Rashi always quotes the Targum. The Targum explains the Chumash just like Rashi explains the Chumash. But the Targum explains it with words that Rashi brings down many times. And Rashi learns his explanation according to the Targum many times. There's Targum. Alright, that's my part. Now we start with the rabbi.
We can listen to you all night. Do you have anything more? You have so much to tell.
They had enough this afternoon with me.
I want to start Farbrengen to talk about the fact that this is a very special birthday. It's such an interesting thing. I feel it's a big schus. I feel that you invited me to come here, and I want to tell a couple of stories. I'll tell you a few stories. I was once in California for an event, a women's event, and I'm good. Okay, thank you. A lady, a shlucha, is driving me to the airport. If you're a traveling speaker, going to California is easier than going to Florida, because if you come to Florida, you can't go back till the next morning. If you go to California, you can get the red eye. So you get home quicker from California than you get from Florida. So I flew in the morning. I was speaking for the women, and I flew at night. So she's taking me to the airport. This woman, she's older than I am. She's my sister's age. My sister's 2 years older than I am. I'm sitting in the back seat of a car, and she's driving, and she's talking, and she says, I'm taking you to the airport. I said, no. It was strange to me they didn't get me a taxi. She says, I'm an avela. I'm in mourning. I lost my father. And when I left, the women started to sing and dance. She couldn't participate in that part. So she volunteered to take me to the airport. Okay? Then a minute or two passes, and she says, I have a very interesting story to tell you. She tells me the most remarkable story. The story she tells me is this, that she grew up in the 70s. She was born in the early 60s. So she was a junior high school student and a high school student in the early and mid 70s. In those days, in Los Angeles, there wasn't nearly as much Yiddishkeit. I mean, Yiddishkeit today in LA is bustling. It's Irve Ein B'Yisrael. It was very, very different. Chabad was in its infancy, probably. And there was also NCSY. There was a young Israel at NCSY. She went to Melrose High School. I don't think her parents belonged to a temple. I don't think they belonged to a shul at all. And she, on her own, developed an interest as a high school student in Judaism. And she was alternating between the NCSY and Chabad. Rabbi Leader, who I think now lives near San Diego, at least he did years ago, was in LA at the time, and he was centered in that place. And they had this relationship. Over time, she became more and more serious. Remember, she's a California girl going to high school in Los Angeles. Doesn't cost her parents a dime. And now you have 2 Orthodox groups that are pulling on her. NCSY is trying to get her to go to a Beis Yaakov high school in Denver. There was no Beis Yaakov in LA at the time. There was no from high school in Los Angeles in the 1970s. So they wanted to go to Denver, which is obviously much closer to California than is New York. And Chabad, the rabbis, wanted her to go to Beis Rivka. So she had 2 issues. Issue number 1 is where she's going to choose to go. And issue number 2 is how she's going to break it to her father, that she's leaving home and it's going to cost her money. You know what I'm saying? Is the public high school was free. She decided on Beis Rivka. She was my sister's class. She went through what we call the system. It's a very bad word. Anyway, so she comes to her father, who she had just lost, and she says to her father, Daddy, she comes to her father and says to her father, Daddy, have you ever heard of the Lubavitcher Rebbe? I don't think he belonged to a temple. In other words, they were really secular. Have you ever heard of the Lubavitcher Rebbe? So her father says to her, have I ever heard of the Lubavitcher Rebbe? I met the Lubavitcher Rebbe. I met the Lubavitcher Rebbe. You met the Lubavitcher Rebbe? Like, how could it be they never heard of it? He says it was 1942. I was a 7-year-old. And I learned in a Lubavitcher Cheder, the Lubavitcher, whatever it was they had. And the Lubavitcher Rebbe came, the previous Lubavitcher Rebbe came to Chicago. The Frierdiker Rebbe left New York on one occasion. Oh, Shalom Aleichem, Shalom Aleichem. A Platz for a roof. We can move it. Oh, Shalom Aleichem, Alter Schedem. The previous Rebbe came to Chicago. It was the one time he left. I mean, he traveled to other places, but this was an official trip. And it happened, by the way, that on that trip, he lost his mother. The Rebbetzin stayed in New York. Our Rebbe stayed with the Rebbetzin. He didn't travel with the previous Rebbe to Chicago. And during this trip, he lost his mother. When he was away from New York, he lost his mother. And the exact same thing happened with his father and his grandmother. That his father had left Lubavitch and the grandmother had passed. There's a lot of similarities. If you'll remind me and I'll remember, I will tell you that story. But in any case, the previous Rebbe came to Chicago. And there was a Chabad Talmud Torah, a Chabad Yeshiva Lazar. And this man is talking to his daughter about his meeting the Lubavitcher Rebbe when he was 7 years old. He said Rabbi Schusterman, and the other name of the rabbi just flew out of my head. I forgot the name of the other rabbi. Rabbi Schusterman. And another rabbi had this little cheder, and they brought them into the previous Rebbe one at a time. This is a story he told. They brought me into the Rebbe. They says the Rebbe was very old. The previous Rebbe was very old. In his mind, he was very old. He was actually all of 62, but he looked like he was 120. And he said these words. This is a man who's not from at all, who's doing a recollection that happened 35 years earlier. He took me in his arms. He held me close. And he gave me blessings. This is what he said. He took me in his arms. The previous Rebbe took this 7-year-old in his arms. And he held me close. And he gave me blessings. So this girl tells me this mice. She's the oldest daughter of this man. And she's a shlucha. She is a shlucha. So if the Lubavitcher Rebbe gives you blessings, there's a tax, you understand? If the Lubavitcher Rebbe gives you a bracha, there's a tax. What's the tax? He's going to take Chamishas Lapad. He's going to take his portion. The oldest daughter of this man, who didn't belong to a reformed temple, ends up not only becoming frum, but becoming a shluch. Now I'll tell you a story what happened to my mother. Same story. My grandfather is American born. My great grandparents have been in this country from their childhood. My grandparents are born in this country. My grandfather, who I knew very well, I was very close to him, was a very, very special Yid with a lot of wonderful traits, including Yireh Shamayim and Midas Tovos. He was a special man, my grandfather. But my grandfather was not a chassid. My grandfather was a plain Yid. He didn't like to have any kind of labels as being extraordinary. He was a plain Yid. He learned in Torah V'das. He went to Torah V'das as a kid in the 20s. And then he was at the Mesifta, that means the high school, in the 30s. Mr. Mendelovich. Rav Shraga Mendelovich had a great influence on his life. He had 2 pictures in his house. Reb Moshe and Mr. Mendelovich. This was his Rebbe. My grandfather, Olav Shalom, had a dear friend who was a diehard Lubavitcher chassid. His friend was Mendel Feldman, Olav Shalom, who lived in Baltimore. Mendel Feldman, remember Mendel Feldman from Baltimore? Rabbi Mendel Feldman. He was a god. He was a big Talmid Chacham. My grandfather was very close to Rabbi Mendel Feldman. Rabbi Mendel Feldman was a Lubavitcher. So Mendel Feldman, my grandfather used to call him Mendel. It's hard for me to call him Mendel, but my grandfather called him Mendel. Rabbi Mendel Feldman says, listen, the Rebbe is here, you got to come see the Rebbe. So he tells Rabbi Feldman, me and the Rebbe's, I understand the salami sandwich, I understand the Yankees, I don't understand the Rebbe's. He says, no, you got to come see the Rebbe. The Rebbe was in the Greystone Hotel. You're talking in the summer of 1940. He was still in the hotel. So my grandfather went into the city after work in jeans and a t-shirt. He came without a hat, without a jacket. He wasn't being disrespectful. He just simply didn't know protocol. He shows up in the hotel, and there's a few rooms with all kinds of holy-looking people with hats and beards and the whole thing. And there is Rabbi Simpson. Rabbi Simpson would later become the father-in-law of this Rabbi Mendel Feldman. He was still a boy at the time, a bacher. And he introduces him to my grandfather. And my grandfather says, okay, you asked me to come, I'm here. So Rabbi Simpson says to my grandfather, my mother's father, if you're going into the Rebbe, you have to write a note. He says, listen, I'm here because Mendel made me come. So write in the note that Mendel made. No, you have to ask for something. My grandfather says, I'm good. 22-year-old American, everything was good. So Rabbi Simpson says to my grandfather, my Zaidi, lived in Gan Eden, ask the Rebbe for a shidduch. Ask the previous Rebbe for a bracha for a shidduch. So my grandfather says, Rabbi Simpson, I'm the youngest of 5. I'm the only one married. I'm at the end of the line. No one gets married at 22. I'm in no rush. And Rabbi Simpson says to my Zaidi, to my grandfather, what do you got to lose? What do you got to lose? What do you got to lose? I don't know what those words mean, but somehow my grandfather, it probably means like, you don't believe in this stuff anyway. So what do you, anyway, so he went into the Rebbe, my Zaidi went with his jeans and his t-shirt. He went in with Rabbi Simpson because already then the Rebbe's speech was very difficult. You couldn't understand what he said. They recently posted, in the last few years, a recording of the Priyadika Rebbe's voice with subtitles. When you listen to the voice and you read the subtitles, you can actually hear the words. But you would never be able to make out the words by yourself. Once you see the subtitles, he's talking. And I found it fascinating. The Rebbe was after a stroke. The previous Rebbe was after a stroke. But he talks without reservation. In other words, he's not talking like a stroke victim. He's just talking. He doesn't repeat himself. He just talks. The words come out hard, but he keeps talking. So you had to pay attention. Rabbi Simpson was one of the few people who were able to follow the previous Rebbe's speech. So he went in with my grandfather, and my grandfather would tell the story, and he would tell the story to anybody. He was not a Chabadnik, believe me. But he says, I walked into the previous Rebbe, the Lubavitcher Rebbe, and in his words, in Yiddish, bin ich geblieben stehen. I stopped in my tracks. He said, I walked in that door and I stopped. He said to me many times, I never saw a face like that. I never saw a face like that. The previous Rebbe's face radiated. It shone like the sun. I never saw a countenance like that. He was so taken just by the appearance of the Rebbe. And Rabbi Simpson went in with him and he brought the note. Anyway, my grandfather was married less than a year later. The joke in the family was he called up his mother, says, Mama, ich will chasen haben. I want to get married. He says to his mother, Mama, he says, you're nuts, you have 2 older brothers, you have an older sister. The expression was, Mama, ich habe nicht gesiegt, ich habe gefunden. You speak Halitzani Yiddish. I wasn't looking. I found it. It was, the Rebbe gave him a bracha, and they got married. The oldest grandchildren in my mother's family are from the youngest child. My grandfather got married the second. Anyway, the end of the story is my mother is the oldest child, and my mother's a Lubavitcher Chassid. So the point of the story is that the Rebbe takes taxes. Shalom Aleichem. This is the second story. There's a lot of stories like this. I saw a letter from the Rebbe. I'm hesitating if I should tell the story. The Kabach twins, Shlomo and Elchaim Kabach twins, they were born from a bracha from previous Rebbe in Vienna. Their parents didn't have any children. And they were born from a bracha of the Frierdiker Rebbe. I saw a letter, I have it someplace, where the Rebbe is writing to the parents in 1948 about the 2 boys. They were extraordinary. I mean, the Kabach twins were extraordinary people. They were very, very intelligent and they're very gifted. We know them, the Kabach twins. And in 1948, I don't know what the letter was about, but the Rebbe wrote a letter to the parents. And in the letter he writes to father and mother, Banai, my sons, parenthesis, I am not calling them your children, I am calling them my children, because they're mine, end the parenthesis. And he continues the letter. I gave you the mine Kinder. The point is, the Rebbe gets a bracha, and he takes his piece. He's entitled. The Rebbe gets a bracha. The reason I'm telling this story is I feel very, very honored that I am here. This is the Shvat Farbrengen, but we're celebrating Rabbi Biston's Tes Shvat Tov Shin Yud. He was born one day before the Frierdiker Rebbe passed away. He's one of the first people to carry the Frierdiker Rebbe's name. And the Frierdiker Rebbe said, this one is mine. Huh? This one is mine. I'm sure you probably have many more personal feelings about the fact that Eibishter put you in a position that your whole life you're serving the Rebbe. But this is a schus. This is a schus. He was named after the Frierdiker Rebbe, and the Frierdiker Rebbe said, you have my name, it's my property. And his whole life, Baruch Hashem, is serving the Rebbe. And you know, the way Hasidim think, and the way Hasidim should think, serving the Rebbe is not a burden. Serving the Rebbe is not, as the teenagers like to say, ruining my life. Serving the Rebbe is life. It's the greatest honor, it's the greatest schus. So I'm speaking on behalf of everybody. I really, Rabbi Yossi, ihr gedenkt dich, was ich unter Vater Jahren, aber ich gedenk ja. Last time I was here, and I felt it's a very big schus that you invited me back. Baruch Hashem, I wish to mention gesunte Jahren. You together with your Balabas, Telariches, Avisham Tevis, Mamshach sein, the Shliches, Biz Mashiach and Komen, and Noch Mashiach. I saw once the Rebbe wrote one of the first Kinnas HaShluchims. The Rebbe wrote, I think, Mamdalet, Ushlichusam b'yadam. Mashiach is going to come, Ushlichusam b'yadam. The Shlichus is going to be at the hand, Lariches Yonim Vishanim Tevis. Shnas Bracha Vatzlacha Ba'akal Mikel Kel. L'chaim everybody, l'chaim v'lebracha, l'chaim v'lebracha, l'chaim v'lebracha. I have one more story that I forgot to tell you. It's a very sweet story. It's in the same vein of the stories that I told before. There's a Yid in Lubavitch, who's, the truth, he's a really big Talmud Chacham, a Gaon. His name is Rabbi Shia Hecht. There's a lot of Shia Hechts in Lubavitch. This is Shia Bereb, Shia Bereb Peretz. Yosef Yitzchak Yeshua. How do you get the name Yosef Yitzchak Yeshua? Listen to the story. He told it to me, I guess in Shivet, where they tell the Maisa, that his parents got married in 1949. His father was a Chassidish Yid, extraordinary person. A Pnimius Dika Yid, a Lamdna Ovid, a very special person. And he had several daughters, I think 3 or 4 daughters already. He has a lot of girls. He has 2 sons, Shia, and then there's in Crown Heights, Mendy. Yisrael, thank you for the correction. Anyway, so what happened was this. In those early years, in strange ways, the Rebbe actually would do things that in later years he wouldn't do. He showed himself more. There were certain occasions where the Rebbe would make it clear that he's performing a miracle. There's a tape of this, there's an audio tape, but it happened several years in a row. Could be it was even on Yud Shvat, where the Rebbe quoted a Gemara, where the Gemara talks about a shepherd and sheep, and the lead whatever, I don't want to say what the lead animal is. And that the Chazal say that when the shepherd needs to manage the sheep, all he has to do is manage the leader of the sheep. So he puts some kind of a muzzle on the mouth of this sheep, which is painful, and if the leader of the herd animal does what it has to do, all the herding animals are herded. So the Rebbe quoted the Gemara verbatim in Aramaic, in the original, and he was quite emotional. You can hear the tape. That was very emotional when he says it. I forgot, the Mlashon gedenk ich nicht, but the Teuchen is that when you want to manage the sheep, so the shepherd puts a constraint, a muzzle with pain on the herd animal. And the Rebbe was referring to himself, that the shepherd is the Frierdiker Rebbe. And he implied what he was saying, he was quoting this expression in the Gemara, but he was saying is, I have koyches, I have special powers. but he presented it as if it's all the Frierdiker Rebbe, and the Frierdiker Rebbe is the shepherd, and he's just the herd animal, kvayachol. So therefore he's got this muzzle and have koiches. So he said this at least twice. I saw it twice. I once heard in a tape, but at least twice. It's printed in the Zichas. Could be more times. There's several years in a row, 54, 55. And the Rebbe said, therefore, he quoted this Gemara, therefore I'm announcing that anybody who agrees to name their son after the previous Rebbe, I think it's twice. I'm guaranteeing you a ben zachar. I'm guaranteeing you a son, which is kind of cool. He announced in part, if you decide now that you're going to name your child after the previous Rebbe, I'm guaranteeing you a son. Now, Rabbi Hecht had several children, but there were people who had no children. You know, the Rebbe said it's easy to say, it's hard to deliver. The Rebbe said that once. It's easy to say. He told the Maisa with the Veledniker, with the Vasaman, Manshari, Alo, Shimsha. You can make up the Polish potatoes, but you got to deliver the children. And the Rebbe delivered. Anybody who undertook to name their son Yosef Yitzchak was Zoicher that Yet ben Zachar. If you already have a Yosef Yitzchak,
or Yosef, or whatever.
So then you get Menachem. I know the Schustermans, Mendel Schusterman from Chicago, was born 1 year after Yossi. And the Rebbe said, if you have a Yosef Yitzchak, they're born from the same brach. So wait. So Peretech was at that Farbrengen, all of us Shalom, and he said, okay, if I have a Ben Zachar, I will have a Ben Zachar, I'm going to name him Yosef Yitzchak. And then his father passed away. And his father passed away young. It was a tragic thing. So he came to the Rebbe, and he said, what am I supposed to do? I committed myself to name him after the Rebbe, Yosef Yitzchak. And now my father's gone. What am I going to do? So the Rebbe gave him those interesting answers. There's a rule in by Chassidim. I don't think it's only by Chabad, but it's for sure by us. You can name after a Rebbe. You can name after any family member you wish. But you don't mix holy and ordinary. You don't mix. If you name after a Rebbe, you don't join a family member. It's only after the Rebbe. That's the rule. If you name after the Rabbeim, it's only after the Rabbeim. You want to name after family, Gesundheit, but you don't mix. The Rebbe said that to people. So the Rebbe tells them in Yiddish, Du wirst geben dem Namen noch ein Schwer, und ich will geben dem Namen noch ein Taten. You will keep your word, you will name your son after the Frierdiker Rebbe, and I'm going to give the name. So his name is Yosef Yitzchak Yeshua. But the name Yosef Yitzchak he got from his father. The name Yeshua he got from the Rebbe. This is Shia Hecht. He told me this story. It's another example. You know, the Rebbe is entitled. You know, he gives brachos. It's his brachos. So l'chaim l'bracha. We should all appreciate that the greatest bracha we could have is that we should have a connection to these brachos, and we should live our lives in a way which are consistent with these ideas. L'chaim. L'chaim l'bracha. L'chaim l'bracha. L'chaim l'bracha. L'chaim l'bracha. L'chaim l'bracha. L'chaim l'bracha.